Everybody, this is Perch. I want to talk about the concept of lowered expectations because it's something that, frankly, I mean, we're going to talk about in a comic book context, but there are a lot of examples about how expectation setting and kind of where people fit with expectations has a lot to do with somebody's success. And I am actually going to pull two recent examples that have nothing to do with comics at all, but are actually political. Uh, oh, wait, comics are super political. So it's all fine. We're all still in the same family. Just kidding. Anyway, um, these, let me bring two to you. And this is going to be perfect because it's two different parties that we're showing here. So in recent, just a few months ago, there was a lot of talk prior to the election that Joe Biden was senile, that he didn't have his mental capabilities, he didn't have his wits about him, he was bumbling crazy person, and he just, this was going to be he wasn't even sure he was alive. I think after he had a debate performance against Bernie Sanders, there was, I think Trump argued that he should have to take a performance enhancing drug test because he was able to stay upright for an hour and a half. Well, um, what this ultimately did, now that we see in hindsight, is it lowered the expectations of how well Biden was going to perform in the debates. And so Biden's, pretty much just being able to kind of, do a reasonable job, doing an average job, got much higher marks than it would have because the expectations were lowered. Now, I want to share this has happened before. And what was interesting was as it was going down with Biden, you could almost see the trap or how it was going to play out come. Because years ago, John Kerry, and actually it happened twice, was debating George W. Bush. And then, of course, George W. Bush was debating Al Gore. And with Al Gore is even more egregious because the news was that, George W. Bush was a moron, that he was barely like an IQ of 50. And Al Gore was a super genius. He was just going to mop the floor with Bush. And of course, what happened was that George Bush did not, drool on the podium and did fine. And it made Al Gore look stuffy and on edge. And it definitely benefited Bush. And then 4 years later, they kind of ran the exact same playbook with Kerry, and it blew up again. And it was amazing. I mean, if you're watching at the time, you're like, why in the world would you go back to the same strategy? Like, at some point, calling somebody stupid is a bad plan because people will show up assuming a comical, like hillbilly level performance. And, we knew from the individuals involved, it wasn't going to be like that. Both in Biden's case and in W. Bush's case, we knew that they could string sentences together. And so, and super clips on YouTube of people saying stupid things that are kind of cherry picked and cut. When you see them then talk in real life, it's like, well, it's not that bad. It winds up helping. So, what does this have to do with comics? Well, because comics continue to make kind of some of the same mistakes in both directions, time and time again. It is the nature of why and it's a cliche and a joke at this point, when Marvel will come out and say things like, this event will forever change the Marvel universe, it will never be the same after this, like they did with Empire. First off, nobody believes this. But even though nobody believes it, expectations inadvertently, maybe subconsciously, still get raised. People still kind of assume that Marvel's at least going to take a swing at these big changes. And whatever kind of imagination starts clocking in people's heads, and I think that's frankly far stronger today than it was 20 years ago. There's no way to meet fan expectation when you start building up hype like that. This has been consistently true with both of the big two, and they cannot help themselves. They continue to want to be hyperbolic about how this hype is going to work. Now, what's interesting is that there's a lot of things that can be said about Robert Kirkman's success with Invincible and with The Walking Dead. And even though Invincible did have the greatest comic magazine, if you watch Kirkman and you look at those interviews and you look at some of the solicitations, Kirkman always was underselling what Walking Dead was going to be. And it's actually a fascinating contrast to look at Kirkman's marketing compared to, say, Marvel's marketing or DC's marketing. Kirkman would intentionally, set expectations very low. You would not see things in the solicitations like the universe will be changed absolutely forever. It will never be the same. Even though in the comic, like they're murdering Rick's wife. Like there's major character developments happening. If you look at the solicits, there was none of that. He became a master at under promise, over deliver, and it to the benefit of the book. It helped him because then every now and then, for example, during when Glenn died, and also kind of the conclusion to the Negan War and other things, when he did say, "Hey, this is a really big issue. You need to, this is one's going to be big." He had credibility. People were there. They bought in. I think that if you consistently tell people, "Hey, this is not a, we're just telling a story," it basically sets expectations lower, so that makes it much easier to come in and just tell an average story, but well told, and it feels like one of the best comics that's ever existed. It's basic management of expectations. It's lowering the expectations to a level that people can compete with. I think that you could argue that Ten of Swords for X-Men suffered from this as well. It was like, this is the first big X crossover. This is going to be huge. The stakes are going to be so high. Do you remember the hype of saying the stakes are going to be so high because if you die in this tournament, you're not coming back. It's like the protocols are thrown. There was this statement, I think, in a lot of the early hype for X Factor, which was one of the first issues coming in on that crossover, saying, the Krakoan resurrection protocols will never be the same. This was what Marvel said. Now, that was clearly not the case, because not only did people who die over in Krakoa, like several of the Marauders, come back, yes, they came back different, but not significantly different. Or maybe somebody will argue it's a significant difference, but given how random characters have been written in the past, I mean, given the fact that we've had Apocalypse be a supervillain, and then also showing up and being a wizard, and I mean, given some of the character changes, to say that Wild Child is a little bit more aggressive now, like, what are you even talking about? Like, there's comics in normal continuity before Krakoa and Resurrection and all that, where Wild Child was murdering people left and right. I mean, it's like, this is not, you haven't changed it that much. But I think that's one of the reasons why Ten of Swords did feel like a letdown to many, because you set that the stakes were going to be really high. You raised those expectations. You made some promises, and then people believed it was going to be a very big deal, and then it turned out it wasn't a very big deal, and so it felt worse by impact, by result. This is almost kind of base marketing 101. You reduce expectations, over deliver, only hype when you feel like you have a chance of living up to the hype, and be very careful of going inverted. This is a term you hear in marketing. Don't go inverted. But I think that you could point to several of the successes, and of the last, I don't know, 2 to 3 years, and maybe for the last 5 years. Look at the success that White Knight had. White Knight came out. It did not promise that the entire Earth and the continuity is going to be shaken forever, and it had a lot of good pickup. Same thing with Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil. One might argue that Chip Zdarsky and a lot of his books at Marvel have been so successful in part because Zdarsky does not get the ultra manic hype machine treatment that others do. Jonathan Hickman, his House of X Powers of 10 had remarkably little fanfare. I mean, there was advertising, certainly, but not anywhere close to the kind of over the top kind of promotion that we've seen for some of the stuff they've done with Jason Aaron or even Donny Cates. There's been a lot more hype pumped into the system than we saw originally from House of X Powers of 10. Once it was clear that was going to be a hit, then the Hickmanverse and all the X-Men stuff just started getting super, super hyped. But for a period of time there, it was succeeding in this under promise, over deliver world. And it actually benefited, I think, things that they said, there's a moment that's going to change the X universe. Of course, they were talking about Moira as a mutant and has been altering kind of reality. This is a major moment, and to some extent, it delivered. And the fact they got that, modest promise and they delivered on it, it gained that series and that person, I think, a lot of credibility. And then, of course, they followed up with, a lot of overhype and, what will we do? And, storylines where it's like, Professor X has been murdered. Oh my God, what do we do? And then, that's solved in 2 issues and we move on. Is it, that's the problem. So what do you do if you're a comic poster? What do you do if you're a crowdfunder person? I think you have to sell on value. You have to sell on, here's something that's being produced. It's you're going to enjoy it. It's a good comic. Do not try and hype it up as being the best comic in the whole world, even if you think that's funny. I think some people view that kind of hype as being humorous. They're going to intentionally overhype it because it's funny to do so. It's on brand. Like there, it is kind of a problem comics have had. I think. When did this start? Maybe 2006, where comics started overhyping themselves as kind of almost like a nod to Stan Lee, because Stan Lee was a big hype man, but Stan Lee established a lot of credibility for his platform and his personality of being this way. He didn't just start out by radically overhyping things everywhere and then assume people will be in on the joke. And I think that's where it works for it works for Stan Lee. It does not work for others. Just as a matter of course. But anyway, it's interesting to look at all this. To me, it's under hype, over deliver. Arguably, very very simple. The simplest thing in the world. Just set expectations modestly. Do your best to get a comic out that people are going to enjoy, and that it doesn't. You don't need to hype it as you shouldn't say it's breaking the internet or breaking the world or face it, true believers. You won't want to miss this one. You don't need to say that. Let the fans, let the readers, let the customers, let the buyers say that for you, and you're going to be in just far better shape. That's my opinion anyway. What about you? How do you respond to hype? And do you see do you have some examples of something that was super overhyped, and as a result, it came in worse than people thought? I mean, some of the events that Marvel has done over the last 20 years, I think you could argue, were overhyped to the point that, they weren't bad events. They were, average, okay, efforts, but the overhype made people sick to the point that it felt worse than it was. I could argue that Future State actually, one of the reasons why, in the end of all things, it's coming in kind of better than what a lot of people are expecting, is because the expectations got lowered. This was the George W. Bush or Biden scenario where it's like you were expecting to pick up that thing. It would be just the worst pile of crap you've ever read in your life. And some of the stories were very average. And because the hype was that it was just going to be an abomination to all of comics, you're like, oh, this is pretty good. I think that may have worked in Future State's favor, quite frankly. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Get in touch with me in the description of the video. All that kind of stuff. It's an interesting thing to talk about or think about, at least for me anyway. Thanks for listening.